Hi, I'm Joseph McNulty, author of the book A Sick Prejudice, Overcoming Our Primal Fears and Stereotypes of Someone with a Serious Illness. The question often comes up what to say when someone near to you gets a serious illness. That's what today's video is about. This will be a short version of that question. I have a longer version out there which you can look at as well, and I recommend. It pulls a lot of information from the book and is a great resource to listen to even if you don't necessarily watch the entire video. Before I go on, I'll just mention my background, which includes my wife, who had cancer from 2001 to 2012, myself also having cancer for the last 6 years. I'm doing exceptionally well and am fortunate that I will continue to due to some wonderful medications and my good health. Also, as far as that background goes, had a mother with breast cancer in the 60s, with lymphoma in the 80s, with Alzheimer's in the 2000s, and she lived to be 86 and had a wonderful, happy life. A father who had Parkinson's for 12, 15 years, and my little dog Chip has diabetes. He is doing very well also. I spent my career in marketing and marketing research, so have put in some of that research background to this book that I wrote, which I hope you'll get, A Sick Prejudice. Now then, moving on to this subject of what to say, it's important to mention first that don't make too much of the conversation. So people will often get quite nervous or anxious about what to say when this, brother or father or sister or husband gets a serious illness. And really, I recommend just diving right in. I'll give you some quick tips here and away you can go. So just have that conversation. I think that the first thing to keep in mind, though, right before you do, is that you want to focus on your state of mind rather than specifically what you're going to say. So there's a lot of videos and books and information out there about what to say, and I really recommend, without going into detail now about it, just focus on your state of mind is the simplest thing, and to get that in order, in a way that is feeling good and is kind of following some basic principles for approaching a situation like this. Otherwise, you're trying to overlay something that you read online into conversations that you're going to have, and it can seem fake. Every relationship and every person is different, and so what to say really is different for each person, and that's why it's so important that it's really your state of mind and how you're thinking about things that will guide you best in having that conversation. So to do that, first sit quietly and understand how you're thinking about things and what you're feeling. So you're probably feeling some worry, you're probably feeling like this could be a burden, like the person could die, the person could be very sick, the person could be in pain, they could wither away. All kinds of thoughts come into our mind, and it's important to recognize those. It's important to understand that everything I just mentioned is in the future, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we need to stay in this moment so that we are not off in speculation land and scaring ourselves and ultimately scaring our loved one as well. If need be, I recommend that you vent privately. Find a quiet place where nobody's around, and you can let go, really. So let go. You might say, I can't believe they got heart disease. I can't believe they have got cancer. It just is unbelievable. Now what do? We've already got so much going on. They're going to have to be taken care of. how am I going to find the time to do it? I've never taken care of anybody like this before, etc., etc., etc. And really let it go for as long as it goes, if that's something that you think would be helpful. The reason for this is so that when you get in the situation, you are fresh, you've kind of gone through that, you don't have to experience that when you get into the moment with this loved one of yours. So now you're having the conversation, and this is a time really to just listen. So let them do a lot of the talking. Don't assume anything. Ask how they're feeling, particularly trying to get at how they're feeling emotionally. They'll probably be talking about how they're feeling physically. So what's interesting, though, is where they are emotionally, because that's going to lead to a lot of what actually happens going forward is how they feel and where they are with this thing, which will change over time, but it is very important to get a handle on that for this first conversation. Just keep it natural, keep it judgment-free, praise them, because already they're probably going through things that they haven't gone through before, and they are reaching into themselves and pulling from new sources of strength and new challenges in their life to overcome. So that's worthy of praise, in my opinion. Acknowledge how they feel. It's understandable that you feel blah, 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 and let them know that it's okay to feel how they're feeling. Often people think that they're feeling wrongly about this, or they're feeling too scared, or not, worried enough, or that they're going to be a burden to people, and they have their own sick prejudices, which you can hear more about in the book. So really, that's a crucial thing, is just to acknowledge so that they can move forward from that they can then start to say, all right, I do feel this way, now what does that mean? Next is, most important, try to keep them in present. So we talked a moment ago about you staying in the present, about you keeping a perspective that is now, and not getting into planning right now, logistics, certainly not what could happen with them and their illness right now. So it's really just staying in the moment, which is where we want them to be. They're definitely going to be in the future for most folks, and I certainly was, and that's a tendency that just happens to people. So once that happens, then there's just too many scenarios and too many negative situations that we can create in our minds that can cause a lot of grief and a lot of toil, and ultimately create some negative healing outcomes because of our own negative expectations. Avoid the what if kind of discussions, which will come up. There will be a number of those that naturally weed their way in, and I recommend avoiding those. Next, express reasonable confidence and optimism. Choose to focus on the good that they can have. It is very helpful for them to believe the treatments and surgeries will go well, things will get done, pain will be manageable, they can recover on time or better. So as you kind of move from this moment to them starting to think about the future, it will be unavoidable. But when it does go there, try and keep it positive. There's every reason to believe that positive outcomes can happen as easily as negative ones, aside from statistics, which I talk quite a bit in the book about. So that's a healthy thing to keep them focused on. Again, even better, when you can keep them in this moment now. When you can't, and when the time is right, having them focus on the positive outcomes can be a pillar of strength for them and optimism, and give them a lot of capability that they wouldn't otherwise have when they think that they may not do well and could even die. That is very draining. You know, don't worry about them being disappointed when you have positive outcomes out there. I think it is better to expect a great outcome and be disappointed if it doesn't happen fully than to prepare for the worst and prove yourselves right. I overthought things, and really that was a difficult thing for me to go through. Sixth, and near the end here, tell them what that you want to help. Tell them that you are here to do something. Here's what I'd like to do for you, and be specific. I'll do yard work, I'll do cooking, I'll bring over meals twice a week, take the kids to school, I'll drive you to doctors. Whatever it may be that feels good to you, offer to do that, and they will politely be saying, oh no, that's okay, that's all right, I don't want to be a burden, I'll let you know. So most of the time I've found that's just a kind of an expected way to interact when illness comes up, because people are so afraid of being a burden to others. So you need to get right through that and say, I'll bring over the meal on Tuesday, or Monday morning I'll come get the kids and bring them to school, or whatever it is. So it's now something that you're going to do, whether it's once or twice a week or once or twice a month, depending on what they need and who else is in the picture. That's it. Then they are much more likely, I've found, to accept that kind of help when it is forthright and it is just going to happen. Seventh, next, tell them you care for them, you love them. That is very encouraging and needed for most sick people, I've found. Also, I think it's helpful to say to them it's not their fault, even if they smoked or they drank. We do those kinds of things for other reasons that may not be entirely or even much our faults, due to backgrounds and experiences in childhood or whatever. So it's important they not feel like they have caused this whole situation. And in fact, in my humble opinion, I don't think people do. It's okay, to be sick. They should, hear that as well, that they haven't failed, that it's okay, it happens to people, and we just work with it. Then, help them plan. So now you can start talking, whether it's this conversation or later conversations. You can get into some of those logistics and that type of thing. Tough to really start planning as you're talking about emotions and things, because it just gets overwhelming. When people are thinking about planning, they're off into the future. You really want to try and keep them in the present with some optimism about a surgery going well, a treatment going well, an overall outcome working out. But aside from that, really, when they get off into the future for too long, there can be some issues there, and can bring down the the mood and the optimism that they have, which, as I mentioned, can be destructive for the situation. Now, though, you can have a conversation, schedule it. Let's talk about planning the next month, and here's what needs to be done, and here's who's going to do it and when, and this type of thing. There's resources for doing that. You can look them up online. I think, as we shift gears and get towards the end of this video, there's some important things that I recommend being cautious about saying. One is, expressing sorrow, tragedy, unfairness, or even shock when you hear that they get sick, and when you have this first conversation, because in a few seconds it really sets the stage that this is tragic situation, it's miserable, it's unfortunate, I'm so sorry, I'm shocked. right away that stage is set that something terrible has happened, when in fact there can be many good things that come out of an illness situation. I talk about that quite a bit in the book. So really don't want to necessarily set it in that framework. That's a hard thing for us to understand because it is such a societal expectation to express this way. Every, one of the hundreds, even thousands of medical drama scenes we've seen on TV and the movies all have that. And people are stunned, and people are saying how horrible and tragic this is. And so the sick one automatically, from the people they love and trust the most, are realizing, wow, this is incredibly bad. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. And that may not be the case, and I think there's a lot of reasons it's not, without going into detail here. So, I would just kind of glide through that, just say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How are you feeling? Boom. And be done with it. Because so much good can come out of it, and we really don't want to label and characterize this whole life experience under the arch of a tragic situation, and they've got one foot in the grave. Don't ask about a prognosis. I don't recommend that. I think that the survival statistics, which I talk about in the book at length, are really things that you don't need unless you are ready to go into hospice or something and need to do some planning within a very short period of time, or some other cases which I talk about in detail in the book. But for the most part, people don't really want to focus on when they're going to die by averages, and those averages can have a lot of problems with them and not be the case for your particular sick loved one. I think being careful about comparisons to other people is important also, because when you compare to people, you've now opened the discussion up to other people. And yes, you're pointing out those that are doing well and those that are healthy and recovered and in remission, and etc., etc. But then it also enables those people who didn't do well, who didn't recover and who didn't have a good surgery, etc., or for those people who did recover to have difficulties in the future, and now you've hinged the expectations of your loved one on some of these people, and now they're not doing well. When in fact, your loved one is a unique person and will have their own experience. Remember too, there will be other conversations, that not everything all has to be done in this one. It's really just to make a nice connection, in my mind, to be there for your friend and loved one, to just start the ball rolling and start the conversation going for future times. So again, thank you so much for watching this video. Another one is out there with more detail. Refer to the book of Sick Prejudice. It's at Amazon, iBooks, etc., etc. Send any questions or comments you may have. Visit josephmcnulty.com. And thank you again so much.